Welcome to Insatiable, the podcast where we discuss the intersection of food, psychology, and culture.
Really owning that radical self-responsibility has been quite big for me. Like, just no one can do this for me. It's my job. These are my feelings. So it's my job to feel them.
I'm your host, Ali Shapiro, an integrated health coach, 32-year and counting cancer survivor, and have radically healed my relationship with food and my body. And for the past 17 years, I've been working with clients individually, in group programs, and in company settings to do the same. Welcome. The information in this podcast should not be considered personal, individual, or medical advice. The third installment of our body series with Sas Petherick is back today. In this third episode, we pick up on the third month of Sas's journey of trying to support her heart health by losing weight, particularly fat loss. This episode was such a delight. I didn't know where we were going to go, but what emerged in the episode is this idea of our emotional bodies and how so many of us are disconnected from that, and how that influences our health, our emotional eating, and whether or not we take care of ourselves in a way that we need to be. We also touched on the importance of acknowledging our emotions, how self-compassion doesn't have to mean resignation, and in fact can be a superpower. And we get an update from Sas on her weight loss, her progress, her expectations as things unfold. And also, I found out the Kardashians have a new food product. Stay tuned to the end if you don't know about this either. Great episode. Enjoy. We also mentioned in the episode at the end how much this is the great feedback we've been getting from this series. And I just want to mention, if you have questions you want us to talk about based on what's come up or your own questions, please reach out to Sas or me. Our contact information will be in the show notes. But let us know. We're doing this to mostly be helpful, and we have so much fun together, but really to be helpful. So let us know if there's anything that you want us to discuss based on what we shared in the episodes. All right, enjoy. So Sas, we're like just getting right into it. We haven't even warmed up each other.
Well, it's our third call on this podcast and our 856th call in real life. So we don't probably need a warm up,
Right. So how have you been since the last time we've chatted?
Like a big mix, like everybody, right? So what I'm noticing is, I feel like there's been a real identity shift over the last few weeks. I'm no longer thinking very much about what I'm doing. It's almost like it's integrating and much faster than I ever expected as well. I think I mentioned on the last episode that I was sort of starting to have less of a debate. Am I going to work out today, or what am I going to eat today? All of that, the kind of pragmatic stuff. I was very much like, oh, how do I fit this in? And now it's like, this is on my calendar. This is what I do. Now working out 6 days a week, which is astonishing to me, but also just how much it's like, oh, that's just what I do now.
Yeah. One thing where both of our work overlaps is this idea of self-authoring, right? And so in self-authoring is kind of having more choice, in my opinion, how you define things, including yourself. And so when you say working out 6 days a week, how are you defining working out now versus maybe how you defined it before the start of this?
Well, so I love a bit of measurement. I really love the dopamine hits from my kind of daily goals really keep me on top of this. But so with my coach, I have a kind of step target of at least 7,000 steps a day, which is just sort of natural activity. So it's not that hard to fit that in, right? If you maybe do 1 20-minute walk a day, just even if you're dropping the kids off at school or if you're walking around a supermarket, you can fit that in quite easily. But I think because I'm aware of that and because I'm enjoying being active, I'm hitting like 10,000, 12,000 steps a day without much effort. I have a couple of strength training sessions, like full body, and I just alternate those. I'm doing that 3 times a week. And I'm also learning how to run because for the last sort of 3 or 4 months, maybe longer, I've been joining my partner at Park Run. He's a runner. He loves running and is a volunteer there and has been part of that community for years. And yeah, he ran a marathon last year. Running's like for his mental health. He loves it. And I've never really understood the point of running unless you're being chased by a bear. But I've been going to Parkrun and walking it on a Saturday morning. It's beautiful, like volunteer run, community walk every Saturday all over the world. Highly recommend to anyone listening. And I've been walking Parkrun for the last 3 or 4 months. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to run it? Like, I wonder if I could run for 5K. And it just feels like a fun challenge. So I've been doing couch to 5K on my kind of rest days for strength training. And I fully expected to feel really tired and like overwhelmed and it's too much. It's half an hour. I can fit that in my day. It's fine, you know? So I'm now got this real lovely balance of strength training and kind of, getting a bit puffed, but it's not at a level that feels really uncomfortable or like I just want to cry in my car afterwards, So yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Well, and I think that's the big difference that I want to point out because typically in diet culture or even anti-diet culture, right, working out tends to be defined as hard. It has to be sweaty. You have to want to reward yourself with food afterwards for doing it, right? Like, I deserve this because I slogged through this like 60-minute boot camp I hated. And what I'm hearing is this like transcend and include. Like, I still like my dopamine hit from knowing that I'm doing it. I still have some numbers I'm tracking. And what I'm adding in is that it actually feels good. And I think that's a huge difference of how I hear you defining working out now as like, this feels good.
And I think the bit that is shifting my identity is the interesting piece because I now love going to the gym and working out. Like that feels really fun to me. Don't get me wrong, I've never really enjoyed exercise ever in my life. Like I was always, I always had a sick note for PE class. I developed breasts, quite large breasts, very young, and I always felt self-conscious. And I never wanted to exercise to draw attention to myself because hashtag teenage boys are horrible. And I think as well, I was the smart kid in my family. My brother was the athlete. He was the sporty kid. So I was kind of assigned that role and let that be my identity for a long time. And even though I've gone through periods in my life where I have engaged in exercise and I quite enjoy team sports like netball and indoor netball and stuff like that, if it's more social, but I've never been someone who found pleasure in movement, in exercise. Always just felt like a real faff and like you're going for a walk. Where are you going? Like, and why? I would kind of get in my head about it a lot. And so I'm very much have not identified as somebody who exercises for most of my life. And I've kind of judged from the sidelines, like anyone who's that into it must not be very smart, like that kind of self-protection-y stuff. But now what I'm finding is if you can find something that you love, that you really genuinely enjoy, and also like you might need to experiment with what you don't enjoy. Like I will never be happy having someone yell at me at a class. And I don't love stuff where you feel really overwhelmed and you've got to manage weights and there's music playing and there's people around you. Like that kind of overstimulus just makes me feel quite panicked. So I don't ever want to join an exercise class. But give me a program and let me work out at my own pace on my own, and I'm just in heaven. The thing that I found is now that I've got like a really great like joy for this movement, the reason that it's totally changing how I see myself is because in order for me to really enjoy that, I've got to be well fed. I've got to be well nourished. I have got to be well rested to have the energy to do it. And so that means that I have got to take exquisite care of myself nutritionally. And that's got to be a mix of joy and fuel, all of that good stuff. So it's changing my relationship with food. It also requires me to have boundaries around, my time particularly, but also around like what's okay and not okay for me anymore. And that might be different to who I was 3 months ago. And everyone can get on board, like it'll be all right. And I've got goals that I want to hit every day with my macros to make sure that I'm well nourished and able to work out. And so that means sometimes I'm going to be like, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to eat that, or this is a no for me. You go ahead. I'm going to take care of myself. Like it's requiring something more of me. It's also, I think, requiring me to really tune into myself. Like, how am I feeling? Like, I'm hyper aware of my body, like twinges, aches. Am I injured, or am I just, is this just the, muscle recovery? All of that is like, I'm so much more aware of myself. And that means I'm way more aware of my emotional life as well, like so much more than I was a few months ago. And so I'm processing emotions more. I'm realizing that actually, working out is a great way to do that, but I need to feel things too. I'm very good at like thinking my feelings. I'm so good at naming the nuance of the feeling. Like, is this irritation or is this rage? Like, I can get right into it, but I'm thinking about it. I'm naming it. I'm not really feeling it. And what I'm getting much better at is actually just going, can you just feel this? Like, you don't have to even name it. You don't have to think about it. Can you let the sensations in your body happen? And there is so much like peaceful power that comes from an ability to do that. And I say this to my clients all the time, like nobody died from feeling a feeling, but you sometimes think you might. And I'm really taking my own medicine. So there's lots of stuff going on for me personally right now. And so, it's just felt like over the last month, particularly wave after wave of emotion. And I've just sat in it and not tried to numb out or comfort myself with food or, those old patterns that no longer feel that helpful. It's like I'm shifting how I respond to those emotions. And so all of that together, like, what this requires of me and what I'm learning about my capability, it feels like, yeah, I'm just lifting some heavy things a few times a week. It feels revolutionary in terms of how I see myself. Like it's a new level of authoring.
Oh my God, you said so much stuff that I want to go back and comment on. But the first thing about thinking your feelings. So I'm creating this. It'll eventually be a self-study, but right now I'm running it live. It's the Your Emotional Eating Blueprint. And the first week is, look, I just want you to check in with yourself because we're all really good at thinking our feelings, right? A lot of my clients will be like, I feel like a bobblehead. I don't know if you have these things in the UK or New Zealand, but it's just like, all head and then you're disconnected from your body. And this one woman, oh my God, I adore her. She was like, a week ago, she was chronicling how she was eating at night. Cause I talk about it's not about the nighttime when people are eating, but it's when your feelings actually have a space to bubble up because feeling your feelings requires safety. It requires space and time. And she's like, before this exercise, and I talk in the program about what the triggers are. She's like, as I'm sitting there eating by myself, like now I can name how I'm feeling. But a week ago, I would have told you I was fine. And I was like, yes, that is that emotional body that if for metaphorical terms, so many of us are disconnected from that, right? And it's like, and then when we finally have space, no wonder, my work is all about like, of course, you feel unsupported with those feelings. And so you eat to stimulate attachment chemicals and a sense of being cared for. But isn't it wild that like we can have this whole other life going on in terms of emotions and not being aware of it?
It's like it happens kind of off to the side. And you're sort of like, oh, something is happening over there. I wonder where there is chocolate over here. Like that was for me. It's like, I think that's going to feel uncomfortable or it's inconvenient. I don't want to be feeling this right now. So I'm going to fight that reality by trying to escape it in some way. And for me and for anyone who eats emotionally, to manage emotions, like I learned to do that at a very young age. Like food has never let me down. Food's amazing. Like if you are feeling, sad or tired or bored or lonely or any of the kind of major stimulating, you know, emotions that tend to lead us towards trying to comfort ourselves, then, food is amazing for that. Like it makes so much sense. I always used to say to folks, who talk to me about getting sober, like alcohol is amazing. Like it is so fun. Like, hello, the best nights ever always involve some drinking, right? The thing that happens though is that we think, well, a little bit feels good, so more is going to feel even better. And actually, at some point, you hit the place of diminishing returns, and you may find you've actually just kind of, in my case, set your life on fire accidentally over some tequila shots, or you behave in ways that take you away from yourself rather than further towards who you want to be or who you're becoming. And I think there's such parallels for me around food as well. Maybe I have that gene that is like, gets a bit obsessed with things and loves to find those comforts. But what I'm finding is actually I have quite a lot of built in resilience from, like, healthy resilience from being sober, where I do kind of have a way of saying to myself, honey, I think that's enough now. Like, you don't probably need that, or how are you going to feel after that? Like, I'm quite good now. I never used to be good at consequences, but now I'm like, like healthy consequences. How do I want to feel in an hour? If I eat this, is that actually going to take the feeling away? Is it going to bring up more feelings that are uncomfortable? Will I feel a bit of like disappointment in myself if I do that? Or do I just want it? In which case, have it, and be joyful in it. But it's like really thinking about my emotional experience from what might drive me in unhealthy ways to kind of overeat or comfort myself with food, and giving myself options for what else could I do. And the self-talk around that is quite compassionate. It's very like, it's not judgmental or making me wrong. And that's long practiced, Ellie, too. I mean, I know, that's something that I work with clients around all the time. And, please don't think that that happens instantly. I think I've probably spent the last 10 years really relearning how to offer myself compassion all the time. And I love that now that it's coming up in this instance as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because another question that got brought up in this class, and it made me think of, as you are starting exercises and now you're in a rhythm with it, but like there's this difference between starting habits and stopping habits, in my opinion. So starting a habit is kind of that traditional, in 21 days, it kind of feels like the neuroplasticity, neuroscience, I mean, again, not to downplay neuroscience, but everyone's obsessed, the bro wellness culture, hacking and neuroscience. And it's like, okay, but the other half of the equation is your body's intelligence and your body's wisdom. And you were just describing of like the self-talk and all that stuff. You're calling it compassion. And what I heard in that was like years of learning to trust and belong to yourself, right? Of like learning that. Cause I think people listening would be like, well, that sounds great. Yeah. Like I know I'm not going to feel good in the morning, but I can't stop doing that. And this is what my work is all about, is like, how do you develop that compassionate place so that you can actually follow through on what you want to do? But so many people come to it from what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Not, this makes so much sense. I kind of almost wanted to slow that down, because I remember on a Voxer conversation, you were saying there was one day you got that like tax bill, from the UK. I think there was like something with your house in Bristol, and you just didn't want to go to the gym. And you were like, but I didn't eat my feelings. And you said, I feel like I walked through a portal or a doorway. Can you remember like exactly? Again, there was this whole built-in self-trust, self-belief that you've been working on for years, but what does that actually look like in practice?
So, yeah, I just had one of those shit days from, where it just felt like everything was going wrong and couldn't kind of catch a break. And I think my usual or kind of learned response, like how I would have usually dealt with that is to sort of say, okay, what can we do? Right? Like, let's sort it out. And I'm pretty good, I think, like most, I don't know, I hesitate to stereotype with the word type A, but I'm quite an over functioner. Like, I find comfort and safety in taking action when things are going wrong. That feels better to me. Whereas under functioners tend to want to dwell in the thoughts and feelings around it, right? Like, that feels safer than taking action. It's like pause, wait, nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. Whereas for me, it's like, I just got to keep this ship afloat, and that's from, a childhood where I was like, who the hell are these people? Are they seriously in charge? Because they don't seem to know how to do this, so I'll do it. So I learned from a very young age that someone has to be in charge. So my usual response is to go, okay, right, what action do I need to take? What needs to happen? And I actually was just like hesitant to do that. Like, I sort of felt like I just need to really feel like I'm so disappointed that this is happening and I'm overwhelmed by it. Like, it feels like a lot to be dealing with in a day. And so I was like, okay, those emotions are there. And I just sort of like started talking to myself in my head. Anyone who works on their own knows that you often have a little monologue going on. And I was just like, oh, honey, what would be the best thing to do right now? And I thought, I'm going to go and make myself a coffee and have some water and just think about what's the best approach here. And I just thought, oh, actually, on my way to the kitchen or waiting for the kettle to boil, I was like, oh, I just want to have a cry. Like, I feel really sad that this is happening. Like, it's really overwhelming and I don't kind of know what to do right now. So I just let myself do that. And, I really love like that feeling of just rubbing your own arms. Like, it feels like you're kind of hugging yourself. And I thought, oh, okay, I need a hug. So that's what I actually need to give myself right now is like, what is the equivalent of a hug? What does that look and feel like? Food is the escape from the realness for me. And I didn't want to escape it. I just wanted to be with it. And so, I was saying things to myself like, wow, this is a pickle. Like, okay, we don't really know what to do quite yet. And I say we because I think we all contain multitudes. So I always talk to myself as a we. But I'm like, okay, we don't know what to do. We're a bit overwhelmed. What feels doable right now? Like, what feels okay? And I thought, oh, okay. I sent off one email about the house and I did one thing to just check on my tax stuff. And then I got in touch with my accountant in the UK. And I thought, okay, that's all I can do for now. Because often we think, got to sort the whole thing out. And then the worry kicks in. And it was like, actually, what I can do right now is take care of myself. So I'm not going to radically alter my day and set my, timetable on its head. I'm just going to carry on. And so I was like, I do want to go to the gym. I think that would be nice to be almost an escape, right? That's my break, which is, the irony. And so it became like this real moment of when shit hits fan, I don't have to make it worse. I don't have to add to it. And one of the concepts I talk about a lot with my clients is that the difference between clean pain and dirty pain. And clean pain, and this comes from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. Clean pain is just you feel the feelings. Like, it's like if you cut your hand slicing tomatoes, you go, oh, the pain of that. Like, you feel that and you're like, oh, take care of myself in that moment, right? If something happens, someone gives you some critical feedback, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to feel that, what comes up around that, right? Dirty pain is adding in a whole lot of meaning that is often from old stories, right? I've cut my finger. I'm so stupid and clumsy. I always do things like this. It's because I'm making a salad. For God's sake, I can't do anything right. Right? That's dirty pain. That's what it sounds like. This person has said, that I have a tendency to be blunt. You get that feedback at work. It's like, that means I'm so bossy and awful and no one loves me here and maybe I should look for another job, right? We kind of go into those dirty pain stories really quickly, because we're trying to protect ourselves from this discomfort. And, what I'm always kind of encouraging my clients to recognize is, when are you adding in unnecessary dirty pain? You're just muddying the water. And I think that's what I was really able to do in that moment, was stay in the clean pain. Stay in the clean pain. It didn't add any stories to it. It didn't make it mean anything. I didn't flip back into, maybe some old ideas or feedback or, messages I've had in the past, old stories. I just stayed in the moment and in the clean pain and in my body. And that was the portal.
I love that. Like, I need a hug and the physicality of that, because in my work, it's rooted in the heroine's journey, which is like this wounded feminine. And we often think of that as represented by our mothers, but not always. But I think so many people who struggle with food issues, there wasn't that attunement in growing up and the witnessing. And that's one of the needs we have when we're struggling, is just witnessing it. This is hard. This is disappointing. And that's what you did. Like, when you have access to the embodied state, it's revolutionary. It sounds so simple, but when we're like disconnected, we have to first witness that. And then it's like, then the emotion, right? It wants to be in motion, can start to shift. So I just want to like name that, right? Because I'm going to think my feelings right now. But for people listening, like, the very first step is what Sas is describing around compassion, is just acknowledge that you're struggling, versus how many of us are like, I just need to get through this, or let me create the perfect 10-step plan to figure this out. So the other thing that you said about is like, I'm a typical overfunctioner. And you gave the binaries of overfunctioning, underfunctioning, right? And it made me think about our stories are often binary, black and white, either or. And so many clients are like, I'm all or nothing. And I'm like, no, that is a protection pattern. It's a developmental way of thinking. And you can evolve out of that. But what I hear you doing right there before I jump into overfunctioning mode, you're kind of integrating some of what you might have judged, the same way that you're integrating I'm either smart or sporty. You kind of skimmed over that. And that was something I wanted to circle back to, of being like, I'm going to judge those people, because I want to get into that too. But going back to that, it's like, oh, I might judge the underfunctioners as like not having their shit together and just in their feelings. I call it homeopathic doses, right? I need small doses of actually not overfunctioning. I can get to the function part, but what shifted for you when you did a little bit of what you might call underfunctioning, but you were actually in your feelings?
With this, I feel way less judgy around it. Like, I think for me, my personal work over the last 10 years has been, how do I get to wholeness? How do I get to be a whole person? And what I think happened in that moment was recognizing, like, I have a great, well-developed resource of functioning. Like, if you give me a problem to solve, I'm in my happy place because I feel purposeful and I've got a plan and I love to be in motion, and that's easy for me. And so that becomes then a default response to almost everything, right? If I let it. But I also recognize that I have other resources. What I've really been doing over particularly the last few years, is, that kind of sacred pause. Like, before I respond, what resources can I pull out? Like, what actually would be the most healthiest? Like, what is my healthy adult self advising me to do here? Like, the wisest part of me that has only, my best interests at heart and wants me to thrive. Like, what is she telling me? And that used to be quite a deliberate thing. Like, when I first kind of came across parts work about 8 years ago, and I started to really look at the different models for that, and And it really makes sense to me, right? This idea that we have all these mini selves and parts of us that come out in different moments. That makes total sense to me. And I think integrating all of those over the last few years has meant, I have these resources within me that if I can pause, the right one will bubble up, or at least the best in the moment one will bubble. And so I know this sounds a bit, I'm hesitant to kind of share this because it sounds a bit like cliched and coachy, but I do have these conversations with myself. And I do also have the part of me that's like, man, you sound like an asshole. Life coach, So I just want to keep it real for folks. Like, I'm not, because some of this stuff can sound really like therapy speak and it does my head in. So I can't even imagine for someone who's hearing this sort of stuff for the first time might be going, Jesus, they must be fun at parties. But there is something I think about that self-talk that at first it's going to sound really weird and you might feel a bit self-conscious about it. And I know I did. I was like, remember a meditation teacher told me once that your natural state is loving kindness and peace in your body, like loving kindness in your mind and peace in your body. And I was like, brother, you have no idea what life is like outside of meditation world. But I do think that you can get there, right? And the steps there are, if you want to build self-esteem, do esteemable things that you witness in yourself. If you want to speak to yourself if you want to have a loving, compassionate relationship with yourself, speak to yourself in that way. Like, I do think there is something about practicing that. And that's definitely been my experience. So yeah, it is a little clunky at first. It's that, okay, you've got some choices. What are we going to do? And sometimes it can feel a little bit clunky, but it does, I think, integrate. You do get to a place of, what I call more wholeness. And this isn't about perfectionism. It's more about, like, right now, what's going to help me the most? Like, what's probably the most helpful thing I can do for myself? And sometimes if you do like pause and listen, you will be surprised, like sometimes you do just need a good cry or a hug or to drink some water, have a biscuit,
I'm so glad you brought that up because last Friday I was watching this practitioner's video around sleep. And for people listening, I've been struggling with my sleep for the past 4 years. And this year I've slept maybe half the year. And she was talking about kind of all the things you should do. And I'm like, I'm doing all of them. I'm doing all of them. And then she came up to stress, right? And how like stress is so, when you lose estrogen and progesterone as that buffer. And I was just like, first of all, I cried I was watching the recording because I couldn't stay up at night to watch it, but I was crying because I felt like someone had seen me, to your point. And then I was just like, motherfucker, I'm over functioning in my attempts. Like, she's telling me not to over function, and I'm over functioning to try to get this sleep thing right. And I just I cried and laughed at the same time. And I was like, that's that clunky part. And I have done this work long enough to be like, okay, Allie, you don't have to do anything right now. But I was and I was in a funky mood all weekend. Carlos was like, is something wrong? Did I do something? And I'm like, well, I just watched this webinar and I feel like, yes, people are like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not sleeping well and all this stuff. But she laid out all of the physiology, like all the mental health struggles that can happen. And I'm like, I've been keeping it all together, and I'm still not quite sure, but something did shift. And then I'm like, oh, I'm trying to like get all my steps in. But sometimes it feels like it's straining more than nurturing. So it's been like, oh, the layer is revealing itself versus me having to like think my way or function my way to it. And it's kind of like you said, like when I get in my body and I stay in that sacred pause, this intuitive, emotional body wisdom can often arise. Like we can receive it rather than having to, figure it out. Because as you and I have chatted, not everything is figure outable.
Marie was wrong about that, actually. Yeah. Just naming Marie Forleo there, who, bless her. I think you're right, though. There's something about that intuitive wisdom. And what I think we miss often and we've talked about this a little bit in our conversations so far, is that we'll often outsource our wisdom, right? We could look for the program, the coach, the diet, whatever, the regime, the protocol that will do our thinking and feeling for us. And sometimes there is like an education or experience gap. I know, I'm learning so much about different things, but I'm really clear about what my coach can't do for me. And she can't feel my feelings. She can't make choices for me in the moment. She can't also feel like the pride and the joy, from taking good care of myself. So I think, really owning that radical self-responsibility has been quite big for me. Like, just no one can do this for me. It's my job. These are my feelings. So it's my job to feel them, and some days that's going to feel like too much, but most of the time I can do that. It's funny. There is this concept I'm learning about called the rate of perceived exertion, which is when you think you can't lift something any further, and that, we're always aiming for a 7, 8. It's like when you get the kind of, the last couple of pushes should be, or pulls, should be, you make a stupid face because it's like, oh, this is really hard, And I think what I'm learning is the rate of perceived exertion will often default to comfort, and we underestimate what we can do. And I think that applies not just to, my shoulder presses, but to what I can feel. I underestimate my capacity to feel stuff that's difficult. I might think I'm at an 8, but I'm really at a 5. I can feel this. It's okay.
I love that you're like, no one can feel my feelings for me and everything. And at least in my work, one of the things I've learned that we need to be resourced is people in it with us as that support system. So that gives us the sense of safety to then take the risk to feel our feelings and try new actions. Can you talk about how you had asked Ash for help in like just really struggling with this? And then you have also hired a coach who is teaching you a nourishing experience. Because I think so many people just are like, I need someone to help me. And they don't think about how this person is going to support them. And is it going to be nurturing or is it going to be some of the same old, same old?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons I wanted to work with Sarah is because when we met, it was really obvious to me that she just said, look, the most uninteresting thing about you is how much you weigh. Like, I just couldn't care less. And I was like, I'm intrigued. Say more. Her whole approach was very like compassion led and very much like we're in a temporary state of over the next few months. This is a temporary state to get you into that, through that sort of fat loss, to recomposition your body so that you can then like spend the rest of your life having fun with living your life, right? Like, so for her, this whole process is like a means to an end. How, what can she teach me about the pragmatics of it all, but also like the witnessing and the support and the, we communicate mostly on WhatsApp, and she leaves voice notes and messages, and I share data every day through an app around, my activity and how I'm feeling and stuff. And so, like I weigh myself every day and send it through the app. And every week she comes back and goes, here's the average loss. Here's what it was, a month ago. So I just think about I'm gathering data. I used to have a real thing about the scales. I was one of those people that like dramatically got rid of all scales of my house. Now I'm like, oh, this is really good data. And it's so interesting to me how my body weight will increase at different times of the month because, I'm still having a completely full cycle and not really in touching menopause at 50, nearly 52, which is a mixed blessing. But I can see like, oh, those weeks my weight will go up and then it will come down. But over the last 3 months, it is trending down all really consistently. And I just use weight as an example because I think that's the bit that we get caught up in. But for me now, it's like one data point, and I'm thinking much more about like the average over the month, you know? So at the moment, I can expect to pretty predictably lose about 2.5 kilos, which is about 4 or 5 pounds a month. And that is really consistent, really sustainable. And Sarah's there to go, okay, let's have some fun with it. That's just the output. Like it's nothing to do with what I'm like I can't manage that. I can't control that. What I can do is create the conditions for that to happen. And so her coaching is all about the conditions. How much fiber, how much protein, how much, movement, all of that sort of stuff. And how am I feeling in all of this and what else is going on in my life, that will influence my capacity. And so all of it is very holistic. It's not a one point thing. And that to me feels like I'm being, like, to your language, like witnessed and held as a whole person, not just what, old Weight Watchers used to do. Here's the walk of shame up to the scale, and that will determine whether you have been good or bad this week. Like this kind of support is way more nuanced and complex and interesting, and more fun because it's like, ooh, I can feel my biceps now. I can feel my quads. I know that my muscle is building. I'm excited about that. I am getting off on building a strong body. And so all of that is so much more interesting and important to me now than, the weight loss is just going to happen because I can totally see that, my body doesn't need those stores of fat anymore because of the way I'm fueling and moving. So it just becomes this process of creating the conditions for the outcome you want. But the way we create those conditions, I think, really, really matters. And allowing someone to be by my side and not having to do it all myself, or to feel like I need to suddenly like become a level 3 personal trainer and nutritionist overnight to be able to support myself. It's like, no, you don't need to. We need community. We need our people. So for me, it's just this place of allowing that being witnessed and held, and also like sharing with her when things are rough or I'm just not feeling it or I am kind of like tired. All of that. It's like the support from Sarah is very much, what can you do today? What would feel good to do today? Like a couple of times I've just gone, oh, I just can't fit the gym in today or I can't do it today. So I make a promise to myself, right, tomorrow we just move the whole week over a day, and we start again. And I think that to me has removed the option of perceived failure. Like it's like, oh, there isn't a point where I have to fail at this. Like I know now I'm going to get to where I want because I've removed the option of failure. It's just, you know, sometimes, you're going to have an off day or maybe even a week or a month if you get ill. So what? Come back into it. It's like my body is never going to leave me. So I'm never going to leave it either. Like it's that there is no end point. You don't get to quit.
I love that. Was just so beautiful how you explained that, because I see so many people who come to me after working with nutritionists or trainers or other coaches who have their protocol and plan. And then, like, I had one client who hired a nutritionist who was like all about being vegetarian. And for this client, it didn't work. Or another client was like, I hired this trainer, but like my kids were sick. I had bad sleep. And it was like, you're not committed. And what you're describing is like, I think we can look at it all as data and start to strip some of the meaning away from the scale if we have that healthy attachment with the support system. But I think sometimes when we're so hard on ourselves and have such perfectionism tendencies, we then find the quote unquote support that will just reinforce that perfectionism versus saying, wait a second. Because again, when I was struggling with food and my weight, compassion to me sounded like weakness. I mean, this was like 20 years ago, right? I've evolved, but it was like compassion is self resignation.
Yeah. It's giving up and letting yourself off the hook. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, compassion is flexibility. It's how you beautifully said, like, I'm not leaving my body because it's not leaving me. It's like we're in this together instead of we're battling each other. So I just wanted to emphasize that because I think I think Sarah sounds amazing. And I think she's the exception versus the rule in terms of that. And the other thing that I loved is like, I'm all about less is more. Like, let's really focus on the root cause of things. And then you have a lot less to do. Because I always think of health as like the vehicle to where you want to go, not the destination. And on the gram, people are out there being like, here's my 10-step wellness routine. And I'm like, are you on a trust fund and this is all you're doing all day? But then people start to then feel shame like they've failed their 5-step morning routine, right? And it's like, okay, wait a second. No, 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 no. This is about flexibility. And even you talking about RPE, right? Rate of perceived exertion. I love that for women, especially over 40, because your 7 or 8 is going to be different based on where you are in your cycle, how well you slept, did you have a stressful week? And, so that is flexibility and that's what's sustainable. So I'll get off my soapbox, but.
No, totally. It was really interesting for me, like when Sarah gave me my workout plans, because I've got little videos and all of that kind of stuff in the app, and there was no weights attached to, like no kind of, she didn't give me any information. I had to fill that in myself. And I was like, well, how much should I be lifting? And she's like, well, how much can you lift? And so I had to figure that out. And she said, and look, if you're doing a lat pull down, which is the one where the bar's at the top and you pull it down to your chest. And so you're moving most of your back and your arms. It's a great exercise. I know that when I'm in my luteal phase in my cycle, which is when my body is at its kind of weakest or the least strength, I can maybe do like 24 kilos, like that is okay. But when I'm in my strongest phase, I can do 36. Like I can do a full set of 10, 36. And it's like, oh, that feels exciting to me. Like, so I'm kind of like, no, coming up to what Sarah calls shit week, where your weights always drop, and you're like, no, sucks. But it's like, you're still doing it. But the rate of perceived exertion is still a 7, still an 8 at that time in my cycle. And at other times in my cycle, it's a 36. But it's still a 7, 8 for that period. And that concept has been really interesting. Like if I've only got 10% to give to something and I give 10%, that's 100%. So it's like, okay, this is really cool. Just as a concept, like what's your capacity? And I always am encouraging my clients to check in with themselves, particularly if they're in like a goal phase, like I'm trying to reach a goal. It's like, the first thing you do is check in, like, how much capacity do I have today? Like what else is going on, And maybe that is, I've got 20 minutes, and how much courage do you feel today? Well, maybe it's minimum. So I'm just going to do the easiest thing on my list. It's still 100% task done today, And so I think I'm really living into that and experiencing that quite viscerally. And I think it's such a great concept for people to work with. Like capacity is everything. And when you can really tell yourself the truth about your capacity, I think then you make space for, I didn't sleep well last night. I've got a sick kid. Kids are always sick, right? I've got a meeting later and I'm stressed about this. It's like, okay, so your capacity is reduced today. What can you do with that reduced capacity? Then it's still 100%. It's just that, it's shrunk to what is possible.
That's why I said, I think it was in our first or second episodes, like I tell my clients, you're going to just measure momentum, not perfection, because that 10%, it keeps you in the game. It keeps you in touch with your goal, or it keeps you lifting. But 100% when you're at 10% is actually setting yourself up for failure in the long run. And this is the long game.
It keeps you present, right? It keeps you in your body, in your life, in this moment, rather than I think what we can do, particularly if we have like body-based goals, we drift off into the future or into the past very easily, right? And they're both kind of fantasies. What's real is what's your capacity right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember early on in my like sleep struggles, I was like, you know what? Like, I have to figure out how to really take care of myself when I'm struggling because this is going to be something that happens. And it sounds depressing, but it was like the reality almost like exhaled. It was like, oh, I don't need to keep up my normal, plans. It's like, what are you going to do when you slept 3 hours last night? It's like, okay. And then you learn how to, I hate to say make the most, but you learn how to be with reality, not the idealized version of what you're hoping will happen. So it's a really important skill set. And it's kind of the through line I hear you saying in this whole episode, like my emotions are real. One more question before we wrap up is you said that being more embodied is really shifting your work and how you're kind of understanding things in the world. And I have noticed with my own clients that about 80% of them have some sort of career shift after we work together. Either they go new jobs, or if they're self employed, they're making more, working less, or they go for the promotion, whatever. But being more embodied just unleashes a lot. So, what is shifting? What are you noticing the connection in your work as you're more embodied?
I think the capacity to feel things is opening up a new level of truth telling for me. Like, what am I no longer available for? And what do I want more of? To be binary, and there's a spectrum in between. But I think it's like, oh, okay, if I've got the capacity to pretty much feel anything, which I am kind of edging towards, I sort of feel like, huh, well, in my work, I believe self doubt is not self sabotage, as is often shared. It's self protection. It's always, you trying to protect yourself from a perceived psychological risk. And there are things like failure, disappointment, conflict, rejection, all of that jazz. And what's coming up for me now is if I'm willing to feel all of those risks, they no longer are risks. And so what does that make available for me? If I'm willing to be criticized, like, so like, okay, you're going to criticize me and I'm going to be able to feel that and it's going to be, and I'll be okay. It's like, oh, what does that do in terms of not just what I am more likely to maybe share or say because I'm not afraid of criticism, but also the energy that it releases from me trying to manage people's perception of me, right? The truth to the question is, I have not a Scooby Doo clue who I'm going to be in a year's time, right? Like, I literally do not know because this has been 3 months and I feel radically different inside. Like, I feel like something is emerging in me that is new, that I don't really know that me. It feels really exciting. I'm a bit apprehensive as well. Like, I'm sure there'll be unintended consequences. So, all to say, like, I really don't know who I'm becoming, but I know that the going back's never an option, right? So I'm going to just keep doing this and trusting that I can be with who's emerging.
I mean, that is embodied self-authored belonging, to use a technical term, but it's the embodied, I've got my own back. And because of that, I'm allowed to emerge because I know I'm gonna be here for me and I'm capable. That's so, oh my God.
Even I'm noticing like this, my podcast is hosted on Substack, and I've always loved writing, and that is really important to me. And like, I haven't written anything on Substack for a while. And I was thinking yesterday, oh, that's interesting because I'm very much in my real life.
Mm.
And I wonder if there is a part of me that will just be less willing to play the content creation game. There's a bit of that as well. So I'm just kind of noticing, like, I actually love having a life that feels great rather than one that maybe sounds great, to other people. Like I'm not sort of not available for that anymore. Like I'm a real person. I'm going to have real stuff going on. And so there is something about just being with myself and trusting that my people might change and that's okay. And I can trust that my work has value and it might look a little different as things evolve. Yeah.
Well, to get, metaphorical, I mean, nature is always evolving in complexity, right? And both of our work is rooted in what we call complexity fitness, right? And that's about evolution. And that is part of, to me, when you said I'm about wholeness, to me, that's what health is, right? It's vitality, it's wholeness, and always evolving into more complex, you know, ways of being. Or, I mean, the essence of your work, because it's brilliant, will stay, and the outer trappings of it may shift and change. But yeah. Well, I'm getting my popcorn. Non-GMO with butter.
Well, did you know one of the Kardashians is now making protein popcorn? So as if end-stage capitalism wasn't the hellscape you thought it was, here's an extra little confetti on top. Yeah.
This is how I didn't even know they were. Carlos laughs. He's like, just because you don't follow someone doesn't mean they're not around. I'm like, the Kardashians are still around.
They are. They are. Yeah. And now they're selling protein popcorn.
How do you get protein popcorn?
I have not looked into this, Ellie. I just laughed. If you were going to make an SNL skit about a Kardashian in this stage in our human evolution, this is what they would talk about. But it's real.
When you don't know if it's The Onion or reality, when you're skimming the news through your Instagram feed, right? That's hilarious. Sas, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I would just want to say, I'm getting so many messages and emails and little DMs from folks who are saying that these conversations are really helpful. And so we're just so, happy that that's happening for folks. And, please do feel free to leave a message for Ellie or I. You can contact us, on Substack, where my podcast is hosted, and we're both on Instagram. I'll leave the links in the show notes below. But yeah, do get in touch. And I just want to also say, Ellie's work around emotional eating, if this episode has brought stuff up, go check Ellie out. She will take really good care of you.
Oh, thanks, Sas. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you. This has been great. I know this is going to help so many people. And we'll circle back in a month to see where you are. I was going to ask, because I do feel like the listeners are wondering, have you lost more weight? But I don't know if I want to end with that.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, isn't it? So my goal is to lose around 50 pounds, and I am 10 pounds down, just over 10 pounds down in 2 months. So I think it's going to take about a year to get to a place where I can then start to kind of really play with definition and muscle stuff.
But you're 25% of the way there.
20 to 25% of the way there, which feels thrilling.
Yeah. I think the getting started is often the hardest part. So, all right. Well, thank you. I just think people were going to be curious. Does this self-compassion, flexibility, and imperfection really work? Yes, it does.
So, and for me, it's if I can lose 50 pounds, 20 odd kilos through compassion and enjoying myself, then, who knows? Maybe I'm not going to release a program. I'm not. I've made that vow to you, dear listener. You will never see me do that. But I do think that this is a better way than deprivation and judging yourself for what you're not doing.
That's the mic drop. Thank you for being you, Sas.
Thanks, love.